On a sunny summer day, a tour guide was leading a group of hikers up a mountain trail. Everything seemed normal until he noticed one person lagging behind. Turning back, he called out to the man, but the young guy was already drenched in sweat, clearly struggling. The others chuckled at his weak stamina, poking fun at how out of shape he looked. But the young man, Subai, explained he wasn't used to physical activity. He was a writer, not a climber. Internally, he cursed his editor for dragging him into this nightmare of a hike. Just as he was venting in his head, the walking stick in his hand snapped without warning. Subai lost his balance and plummeted off the side of the cliff. Everything went black. Hours passed before Subai's eyes finally fluttered open. Groggy and confused, he tried to understand what had happened. The last thing he remembered was falling. So why was he now lying on the ground with his hands bound? Scanning his surroundings, he suddenly froze. A strange-looking girl was staring at him, saliva dripping from her mouth, eyes wide and hungry. Subai tried to keep calm, hoping she didn't actually plan to eat him, but that hope quickly vanished when she pulled a long blade from behind her and muttered something in a language he didn't understand. She poked at his sides, prodding his flesh like she was inspecting meat. Subai panicked. So this was how he'd die? Not from the fall, but from being eaten by some tribal cannibal. The girl suddenly raised the knife, but instead of attacking him, she slashed the ropes binding his hands. He blinked in disbelief. She wiped her mouth, mumbled something again, and turned to walk away. In her own words, she reminded herself that no matter how hungry she was, she must not eat people. Subai slowly sat up, watching her leave. Now free, he took a better look at his supposed captor. His heart skipped a beat when he noticed something odd, ears poking out from her head and a tail swaying beneath her skirt. Was he really in another world? Forcing himself to stay calm, he tried to think it through logically. He was a writer, someone who dealt with fiction and fantasy, but even this was too much to accept outright. He needed to observe more before jumping to conclusions. He looked around. He was lying on dried grass inside what seemed to be a primitive tent, surrounded by scattered animal bones and traces of a campfire. The place felt like something out of a savage, prehistoric world. Still groggy, he followed the girl out of the tent. Outside, the scene was even more surreal. Children with animal features were playing, and adults, also humanoid beasts, walked around, carrying spears and wild boars over their shoulders. They were upright, but clearly not human. That's when it hit him. He really wasn't on Earth anymore. This was a completely different world where anthropomorphic animals lived like tribespeople. Before he could process it all, a shadow fell over him. A massive beast-like man towered above, asking something in the same unfamiliar language. Subai stood frozen, not understanding a word. Just then, the girl from earlier came up beside them, cheerfully greeting the man. Her father, it seemed. They talked briefly, wondering why Subai wasn't responding. His delicate features made them suspect he might be from a big, important tribe. When the tribe's sorcerer requested to see him, they decided to take Subai along. As they led him through their village, Subai couldn't help but stare at everything around him in disbelief. This world was clearly real and unlike anything he'd known. The villagers looked at him curiously. He had no tail, no wings, no muscles, nothing like them. Still unsure of where he stood, he decided to go along without resistance. Escaping seemed impossible for now, and at least they hadn't eaten him. Eventually, the large man pointed toward a big tent, gesturing for Subai to enter. Inside, the tribe's leaders were in the middle of a serious discussion. Their sorcerer was dying, and none of the villagers had the magical potential to replace him. If no successor appeared, the tribe would eventually crumble. They had one last option: test the outsider. Subai stepped inside the tent and saw an elderly man sitting before him. The sorcerer, no doubt. The old man motioned for him to sit, and Subai complied, mentally preparing to take the man hostage if things turned ugly. At first, the elder looked asleep, but then his eyes opened, and suddenly, Subai felt himself falling again, this time through a sky full of stars. He stopped falling and found himself staring at a blazing fire. Inside the fire, a mysterious symbol twisted and flickered. The old man appeared beside him and explained they were now inside Subai's soul. He was using a ritual to embed their language directly into Subai's soul. When asked if he could see anything, Subai mentioned the dragon or serpent-like symbol in the flame. That was enough. The sorcerer smiled and ended the ritual, then turned to the villagers and proclaimed that Subai would become the next sorcerer of the Yanlong tribe. Gasps and murmurs followed. Some questioned whether they should trust an outsider, but with no other choice and the elder's approval, the decision was accepted. Subai, still reeling, asked himself, "Can I really be a sorcerer?" Outside, the villagers chatted about the strange new sorcerer. Subai still wasn't sure if being chosen was a good thing. The girl from earlier, now a bit more composed, came up to scold him for doubting himself. She introduced herself, Yanhua, and told him she'd be in charge of taking care of him from now on. Subai wanted to understand more about the tribe, so he asked Yanhua to explain how things worked around here. She told him their tribe was named after their totem, the Yanlong. That symbol he saw earlier in the fire, it was the totem that gave their tribe its name and power. She explained the hierarchy of their people. At the top was the old sorcerer, then came her father, Yangku, the chieftain. Below him were the captains, then the hunters, the totem soldiers, the reserve soldiers, and finally, the commoners. Subai was surprised. From what he had seen, there weren't that many people here. Why so many ranks? Yanhua's face changed. Her tone turned bitter. She explained that their tribe used to be large. They lived in fertile ancestral lands where food and water were never a problem. Back then, they had 300 members and 65 trained warriors in just one hunting team. But things changed 6 months ago when the Black Snake tribe attacked. They took over their hunting grounds, slaughtered many of their people, and forced the survivors to flee. Now they lived here in this rough, dry land with barely enough to eat. Yanhua clenched her fists and said she would become stronger, free their captured people, and reclaim their home. After hearing that, Subai took some time to explore the village. The more he saw, the worse it looked. Everyone was tired, the place was filthy, and if a disease were to break out, it would spread fast. Subai scratched his head, completely overwhelmed. That's when something unexpected happened. A window popped up in front of him, something only he could see. It was a system message telling him the daily help system had been activated. He stared at it, stunned, but also not totally surprised. He was a writer, after all. If he had been transported into a fantasy world, it made sense that he'd get some kind of system to help him survive. He asked what functions the system had. It told him that once a day, he could receive a random bonus, either normal, intermediate, or premium. Even better rewards would come after a year. But Subai scoffed at that. Waiting a year, everyone might starve by then. Still, he took note of the system's potential. Yanhua, who was still nearby, started getting annoyed. She had spent time explaining everything, but now Subai was just zoning out. She snapped at him, asking why he was ignoring her. Not wanting to reveal anything about the system, Subai said he just had a headache. Yanhua rolled her eyes but decided to let it go. If he was tired, she'd take him to rest. She brought him to a new tent, which he assumed was his. But as he laid down, he noticed a faint smell in the bedding, strangely sweet, like milk. Curious, he started sniffing it, until Yanhua suddenly tackled him, cheeks burning red. She shouted at him not to sniff it so casually. It wasn't his bedding, it was hers. Subai's eyes widened, so he was staying in her place. That meant they'd be living together? He didn't know whether to be embarrassed or grateful. Despite her horns, Yanhua had a pretty face and a well-toned body. But before his thoughts could spiral any further, she pinched his cheek hard and told him not to get any weird ideas. She wasn't staying the night anyway. She had patrol duty. After she left, Subai decided to finally use his daily bonus. It was his first time trying the system out, so he got an intermediate reward, a level 1 healing skill. Not bad. He wondered if the skill could be upgraded, and the system answered that it could. He'd just need to increase his proficiency. To do that, he opened his attribute panel. There, he saw his stats: stamina, strength, agility, spirit, and more. Unsurprisingly, they were all low. That's what happens when your only workout is sitting at a desk writing stories. Subai sighed and told himself he'd need to start exercising. Meanwhile, back in another tent, the old sorcerer was talking to Yangku, the tribe's chieftain, and Yanhua's father. Yangku asked if it was really safe to make this unknown outsider their next sorcerer. The old man looked weary. His body was failing, and he knew he didn't have much time left, but he was firm in his decision. They didn't have anyone else. Besides, he had peered into Subai's soul, and it was pure, not a trace of malice. If anything, Subai might be from a legendary tribe, given how clean his soul was. Yangku still seemed unsure, but the sorcerer told him to protect Subai, so long as the boy didn't do anything evil. Before Yangku could leave, the sorcerer called him back for one more thing. He said their tribe needed to think ahead. They needed more future generations of wizards. A knowing glint flashed in Yangku's eyes. He nodded. He understood what the elder meant. Outside the tent, Yanhua had been eavesdropping. As she tried to sneak away, her father caught her. She tensed up, thinking he'd scold her, but instead, he gave her a task. Her eyes lit up, hoping for something important. Then Yangku told her she needed to marry Subai and give him lots of children. Yanhua's jaw dropped. Her face turned bright red, and she instantly rejected the idea. She said she'd only marry someone stronger than her, and he was a twig. No way he could beat her. She stormed off, yelling that she didn't want kids. She wanted revenge on the Black Snake tribe. Her father chased after her while the old sorcerer stayed behind, smiling quietly at the chaos. It reminded him that his tribe still had life, still had energy. He vowed to spend whatever time he had left ensuring their future. The next morning, Subai stepped out of Yanhua's tent, shivering from the cold. He looked around and noticed the tent had several holes, letting in the freezing air. He had curled up tightly just to survive the night. He needed to fix this if he wanted to sleep better tonight. When Yanhua returned, Subai asked her to help him gather more straw to plug the holes, but when she saw him, her face turned red. All she could think about was her father's ridiculous demand, that she marry Subai and have babies with him. The thought of their hypothetical kids made her flustered. Trying to cover her embarrassment, she hit him out of nowhere, yelling that she didn't want to be with him. Subai looked at her, confused and exhausted, explaining that he just wanted straw, not whatever she was imagining. Eventually, she calmed down and led him through the village to the straw pile. On the way, Subai spotted 2 children curled up under a makeshift shelter. They were shivering from the cold, barely protected by thin coverings. He asked why they weren't sleeping in proper houses. Yanhua told him that most villagers didn't have homes of their own. Animal fur was incredibly valuable, and only the most important people, like him, got a tent. The rest simply made do. Subai looked at the kids again, then down at the straw in his arms. Without a second thought, he walked over and gently laid his bundle over them. The kids smiled in their sleep, warm for the first time in a while. Yanhua turned to him, surprised. She asked why he did that when he was supposed to be the most important person in the tribe. But Subai answered firmly, "They're just as important." That moment made her pause. Maybe he wasn't the spoiled outsider she imagined him to be. Later that day, a guard announced the return of the hunting squad. Villagers rushed to greet the hunters, who came back with large boars slung over their shoulders. Cheers echoed through the village. At least for a few days, the children wouldn't go hungry. Watching the celebration, Subai's own stomach grumbled. He turned to Yanhua and asked how food was divided among the tribe. She explained that most of the meat went to the totem warriors. A smaller portion was shared among the reserve soldiers and children. As for the elderly, they only got to eat meat occasionally. Usually, they survived on wild fruits. Subai was stunned. So even old men and women hardly got to eat. And on top of that, only half of the meat from each hunt was consumed. The rest had to be dried and stored for future hunting trips. That meant the entire food supply for the village relied on the success of a small team of hunters. It was unpredictable and fragile. Subai asked if they had any farming or domesticated animals to help. Yanhua didn't even understand the question. She stared at him blankly. Subai didn't know how to explain farming to someone who'd never heard of it. How could he suggest raising pigs when they didn't even have enough food for themselves? Just then, one of the hunters approached them. A lion-headed man with a confident stride walked over, asking Yanhua who the new guy was. He teased her, wondering if she had finally found a mate to have kids with. Yanhua snapped at him, blushing hard. She explained that this was Subai, the new sorcerer. The hunter, named Changxi, lit up with joy. So the new sorcerer had finally been chosen. That meant the tribe had hope again. He clapped Subai on the back and offered him some meat from their hunt. Subai hesitated. He asked Yanhua if they were always this generous to strangers. She explained it wasn't because he was a guest, it was because he was the future sorcerer. The tribe's survival now rested on his shoulders. Her words were confirmed when a small child walked up and offered Subai a chunk of his own meat. Subai smiled kindly at the gesture, but felt a knot of guilt form in his chest. All this kindness, just because of a title he didn't ask for. That evening, Subai and Yanhua sat by a campfire, roasting some of the meat. Yanhua asked why he didn't accept the child's offer. She told him it was supposed to be an honor for the child to share food with the sorcerer. But Subai replied that he didn't think it was something to be proud of, especially when that child probably needed the food more than him. Yanhua stared longingly at the sizzling meat on his stick. When Subai noticed, he offered it to her. She tried to act modest at first, but couldn't hold back. She leaned in and took a monstrous bite. To Subai's horror, she devoured nearly the entire thing, bone and all. He looked at the tiny leftover scrap and took a slow, miserable bite. The flavor made him nostalgic. Salt. It had been so long since he'd tasted something with actual seasoning. Yanhua noticed his expression and reached into her pouch, offering him her personal stash of salt. There wasn't much left, and most of the tribe's salt went to the totem soldiers. As a reservist, this was all she had. Subai was touched, but he refused. That salt was too valuable to waste on him. As the fire crackled, Subai's mind drifted again. The tribe was in such a desperate state. They lacked food, sanitation, and even basic resources. He needed to do something. He asked Yanhua where they usually got salt from. She told him they had to trade for it. Every 15 days, the leopard deer tribe hosted a market. Tribes from around the region gathered there to trade goods. Hearing that, Subai made up his mind. He would go with them to the next market. He needed to learn more about this world if he wanted to help these people. After dinner, Subai was summoned to the old sorcerer's tent. As he stepped inside, he noticed the totem warriors gathering around outside, quietly murmuring about what might happen next. The atmosphere was heavy. Inside, the old sorcerer sat, waiting for him. He told Subai that the inheritance ceremony would happen tomorrow, but tonight, he would explain everything Subai needed to know, everything about what it meant to be a sorcerer in this world. He began with the foundation of their power, the totem. Each tribe had a unique totem, and only the sorcerer could wield its true strength. The sorcerer's role wasn't just about casting magic or leading rituals. It was about guiding the entire tribe's future, protecting its people, and ensuring their survival. The sorcerer was the only one who could activate the totem mark hidden in the blood of their warriors. Without it, even the strongest warrior would never awaken their full potential. Subai listened intently as the old man explained that while everyone in the tribe had some level of blood power, it took proper training and the totem's blessing to elevate someone to a totem warrior. Reserve soldiers could handle most beasts, but outside the tribe, more terrifying monsters roamed. Only the elite warriors, those awakened by the totem, could face them. In short, the tribe's strength was built on how many totem warriors they had, and those warriors couldn't exist without the sorcerer. Subai was beginning to understand why his new role carried so much weight. But there was more. The old sorcerer pulled out a thick leather blanket and opened it carefully. Inside were scrolls, carved stones, and bundles of dried herbs. These, he said, were methods for creating domino magic, a powerful kind of magic used only by sorcerers. He handed Subai a scroll filled with strange symbols. As Subai stared at it, the symbols started glowing, and dizziness washed over him. The old man assured him that he'd understand everything after the ceremony. He showed Subai a carved bone piece and explained that this was how magic was sealed and activated. With enough magic energy, he could use these items for healing, blessings, and even attacks. The most common were poison techniques, strength-boosting blessings, and rapid healing. When Subai asked what kind of magic the old sorcerer specialized in, the old man admitted he focused on healing and blessings, or at least, that's what he told people. Not everything a sorcerer could do should be made public. The role came with a target on its back, and secrecy was just as important as strength. He warned Subai never to share any of the knowledge inside the leather blanket. The sorcerer's secrets must stay protected to keep the tribe safe. Suddenly, the old sorcerer fell into a violent coughing fit. Blood trickled from his mouth, staining his hands. Subai rushed to his side and caught him before he collapsed. Panicked, he cast his level 1 healing spell, but the system responded coldly. Ineffective. No proficiency increase. The sorcerer smiled weakly. He knew his time was almost up, but he was relieved that his successor had arrived. He told Subai not to waste more magic. His life force was already fading. Even so, Subai kept trying to heal him, casting the spell again and again, but nothing worked. The old sorcerer whispered that he wouldn't get to see what great things Subai might achieve, but there was no more time to delay. They still had one last thing to do. He asked if Subai remembered everything he'd been told. Subai nodded firmly. With that, the sorcerer stood up with surprising strength and walked outside. The villagers were already gathered. Under the glow of the moon on a raised platform, the ceremony began. Subai knelt before the old sorcerer. The man raised his hand and began the ritual, recounting how, after 63 years, it was finally time for a new sorcerer to rise. The totem warriors chanted, each offering a drop of their blood. The drops floated into the air and spun around the platform, forming a glowing ball. The totem mark emerged from it and surged into Subai's body. He was bathed in radiant light. The sorcerer then leaned in and pressed his fingers to Subai's head, transferring all of his knowledge and memories. The history of the sorcerers, the truth about the totem, and the secrets behind their most powerful techniques. Subai's consciousness drifted. He saw visions of a young boy in a barren land, walking under a brutal sun with a small group of tribe members. They were starving, but they pushed forward toward their ancestral land. That night, the boy held a talisman and prayed to the totem god for guidance. A flash of light burst from him, and he collapsed. His mother and his teacher, both sorcerers, ran to him in panic. He had taken too many divine potions. It was a taboo. He wouldn't survive. But the boy smiled, saying he had seen their future. His mother hugged him tightly and reminded him not to rely on visions but to hold on to the memory of what he saw. They looked at the night sky, imagining a time when their tribe would grow strong again. The vision faded. Subai opened his eyes. He was back in a tent. He must have passed out after receiving the inheritance. But something had changed. His vision was sharper, his body felt stronger, He opened his attribute window and saw the results. His stamina, strength, and speed had doubled. His spirit had multiplied tenfold, and his magic power had increased drastically. He was finally a real sorcerer. Curious, he asked the system why spirit and magic power had separate values. The system explained that spirit influenced magic power, but system-based skills like healing only used spirit. That clarified a lot. He also remembered to check his bonus for the day. Since he had passed out yesterday, he had 2 to claim. The first was a fruit knife. The second, a skill book, linen textile crafting. The knife was underwhelming, but the textile skill sparked ideas. Most villagers wore animal hides. If he could craft linen, maybe he could make simple sackcloth. It was a small step toward improving their lives. At that moment, Yangku stepped into the tent, apologizing for interrupting. But as the new sorcerer, Subai needed to move into the main tent now. Subai's heart sank. He asked quietly what happened to the old sorcerer's body. Changshi came in and explained that they had cremated him as per his wishes. Only a small, smooth golden stone remained. Subai recognized it immediately, a relic. Scientifically, it was just calcified remains. But in this world, a relic meant a person of great virtue. Only someone with infinite merit left behind such a relic. He held it gently in his hand and whispered a promise. One day he'd build a temple for the old man, after they reclaimed their homeland. But for now, he had to focus on leading the tribe. After settling into the main tent, Subai called in 2 of the totem warriors to get a clearer picture of the tribe's situation. The first thing he asked about was their meat supply. Changshi replied that they barely had enough for the totem warriors. The bigger issue, though, was that they didn't have enough left to feed even the 6 remaining reserve soldiers. That number shocked Subai. Only 6? Changshi explained that the tribe originally had 26 reservists, but during their migration, many were captured by the Black Snake tribe. They were either killed or taken as slaves. Subai understood now. If they wanted the tribe to survive, they first needed to understand their enemies. He asked about the Black Snake tribe's current location. Yangku answered that the Black Snake tribe was far away for now. Their own current territory was barren and unappealing, which meant no other tribes were interested in fighting them. That was a small advantage. Still, the downside was clear. Hunting was tough. It took an entire day just to find prey, and then 3 more days to gather enough for everyone. That kind of system couldn't last forever. Subai could already see the problem. They were too dependent on hunting. One bad expedition and the whole tribe would starve. They needed a backup plan. Then he remembered the linen skill he'd received earlier. He asked the warriors if they knew anything about linen. Changshi's face lit up. Linen was rare, something only large tribes could produce. As a child, he had dreamed of having enough linen to make clothes for himself and his future kids. But the problem was trade. 1 roll of linen cost 3 full pieces of dried meat jerky, and the tribe didn't have much to trade with. Changshi tried to give him a visual estimate by using his own body as a measuring guide, comparing jerky to linen conversions. Subai quickly realized what was going on. Big tribes had a monopoly on linen. They controlled the production, set the prices, and left everyone else in the dust. If their tribe could make their own, that would be a game changer. So he made a decision. Their tribe's first goal: produce enough meat to eat freely, and enough surplus to trade or barter for the materials they lacked. A few days later, the hunting group, now led by Changshi, was preparing to leave the village again. But instead of just hunting animals, they were also tasked with finding a specific plant. Subai had told them the secret. He knew how to make linen, but he also warned them to keep it quiet. If word got out, bigger tribes might target them. So for now, their top priority was finding the plant needed for linen production. As they disappeared into the forest, Subai stayed behind, worrying. Their current jerky stock would only last about 15 days. Time was running out. And even if Changshi managed to find the plant, Subai wasn't sure how to teach the entire linen-making process. He didn't want the method to be common knowledge. It had to stay protected. He thought it over. What he really needed was an assistant, someone he could teach everything to. That person could then divide the knowledge into manageable steps and teach others. That way, the full process would still be safeguarded. But food wasn't their only issue. Their drinking water, salt supply, and hygiene system were all in bad shape. Subai groaned in frustration. Back on Earth, he could barely manage his own life. Now, he had an entire tribe depending on him. Just then, Manhua stepped into the tent and saw him holding his head. She thought he was sick and rushed over, pressing her forehead against his to check his temperature. Subai freaked out, embarrassed, and backed away, asking why she was getting so close. Manhua explained calmly that she wasn't intruding. She was guarding him. With her father and the other warriors out hunting, she was responsible for his protection. Subai teased her, asking if she was really reliable enough for that. In response, she nearly strangled him on the spot. After calming down, Subai finally shared what was on his mind. He asked if it was normal for the sorcerer to be in charge of everything. Yanhua explained that usually the sorcerer had an assistant, but their last one died while protecting the old sorcerer during the Black Snake tribe's attack. That story made things even heavier. Subai asked if she had anyone in mind for the role. Someone smart, hardworking, and with good ideas. Yanhua grinned and asked if he was just describing her. Subai rolled his eyes and told her she was none of those things. So Yanhua offered a more practical suggestion. She mentioned he didn't just need an assistant, he needed a miko. In their tribe, the miko was a woman who handled the daily affairs of the sorcerer's tent. Chores, organizing, delivering instructions, everything. Subai realized that's exactly what he needed. He asked her to help him find a suitable candidate. But Yanhua hesitated. She remembered her father's earlier pressure, telling her that she should become the miko and marry Subai. Most girls in the tribe dreamed of becoming a miko. It was the highest honor, but not for her. She wanted to stay a totem warrior, fight the Black Snake tribe, and reclaim their land. Still, she agreed to help. A little while later, she brought Subai to a modest tent in the village. She explained that someone inside might be a good fit. Peeking in, Subai saw a beautiful girl with fox ears and a tail. Her body looked frail, and the tribal markings on her cheeks were faded. He pointed this out to Yanhua, saying the girl seemed weak. Yanhua agreed, but also defended her. The girl's name was Yu Ying, and despite her gentle appearance, she was kind, diligent, and responsible. Yu Ying had been raised by her uncle, Chang Shi, after her parents died. Recently, her aunt had become pregnant, so Yu Ying moved out to avoid taking food away from the baby. She didn't even eat meat anymore, just fruits and grass. Subai respected that deeply. He remembered his own childhood and knew she probably moved here to find peace of mind. Inside the tent, the other girls were teasing Yu Ying, telling her to go back to her uncle's home and live comfortably. They even said she could become the miko. Her parents had been important tribe members, and she was beautiful. Why not? Blushing, Yu Ying shook her head. She said the sorcerer would never want her. Besides, Yanhua had always dreamed of becoming miko since they were kids. From outside, Subai raised an eyebrow. He hadn't known that. Suddenly, Yanhua stormed into the tent, flustered and defensive. She scolded Yu Ying for saying such things. Yu Ying asked if she was eavesdropping. Subai stepped in, awkwardly admitting that they were just observing. He sat across from Yu Ying and asked her a few questions, starting with whether she could read or write. The girls were stunned by the question. Yu Ying looked down and said no. Subai looked to Yanhua, feeling guilty. He hadn't meant to ask something so sensitive. Yanhua explained that only large tribes had written language. Small ones like theirs didn't even have a writing system. Subai sighed and changed the topic. He told Yu Ying that Yanhua had recommended her to be the miko. Since Yanhua didn't want the role, Yu Ying might be the best fit. But Yu Ying shrank back, saying she wasn't smart enough and always made mistakes. Without saying much more, Subai stood up and walked away. Yanhua chased after him, asking why he gave up so easily. He told her that he wanted Yu Ying to take the role, but it had to be her choice. If she really wanted to become miko, she needed to step up. This wasn't about forcing anyone. It had to be something she chose for herself. Yanhua listened quietly. Behind them, a girl came running from the tent, but it wasn't Yu Ying, just another girl bringing Subai a gift. As they were about to leave, the girl stopped them again. Yu Ying was running toward them, panting, out of breath, but determined. When she reached them, she looked Subai in the eyes and declared, "I want to become the miko." A few minutes later, Yu Ying stood there, breathless but beaming, her voice trembling with emotion. She had finally said it. She wanted to be the miko. Tears welled up in her eyes as the reality of it sank in. She wasn't dreaming anymore. The role she once thought unreachable was now hers. Subai accepted her request without hesitation, but Yanhua wasn't so convinced. As they sat down, Yanhua leaned toward him, whispering that he was way too quick to make such a big decision. Subai shrugged. It wasn't like he had a checklist or a proper test for picking a miko. And besides, both girls were already stressing him out. At least they were easy on the eyes. Yu Ying wiped her tears and looked up, grateful but a bit confused when Subai handed her a cloth. He asked her to wash her face, but she paused. Why waste water on that? Subai froze. Wait, was water really that scarce? He asked the girls how often people in the tribe took baths. Yanhua stood up proudly and answered with a straight face. Of course we shower. I take one every year, during the rainy season. Subai's brain stopped. Every year. Suddenly, he realized these people were used to their own stink. Their senses had adapted. That explained a lot. If he was going to improve hygiene in the village, it had to start with solving the water shortage. He asked the girls where they got their water from. They mentioned a small lake deep in the southeast forest, but there was a problem. The lake was surrounded by extremely dangerous beasts. Only totem warriors dared to get close, and even then, only when necessary. That's why the tribe had so little water. Just enough to stay alive, never enough to waste. Subai immediately decided they had to go there, but the girls panicked and grabbed him from both sides, holding him back, leaving the village as the sorcerer was way too risky. He was a target. Rogue warriors from other tribes sometimes hunted down sorcerers just to steal their powers or force them to perform inheritance rituals. Manhua even mentioned that one of their previous sorcerers had been kidnapped. When they finally got him back, he was too weak to live. Subai took that in. He knew the risks. But still, how could he sit around doing nothing while women, children, and the elderly were barely surviving? As the sorcerer, he had to act. Just then, a figure darted through the trees. Another totem warrior approached. But before he could get close, Shahong, one of the hidden guards assigned to protect Subai, grabbed and restrained him instantly. Weapons clashed, but the attacker's dagger shattered against Shahong's strength. The tension settled when they recognized each other. Both were from the Yanlong tribe. The second warrior, Black Fang, had rushed back because one of their men was injured. They needed domino magic, healing magic, to save him. Subai stepped forward without hesitation. He told them to take him to the injured warrior. The group moved quickly through the forest, reaching a small clearing where the wounded warrior, Maimeng, lay bleeding. Yangku was already there, kneeling beside him. Maimeng looked up and whispered that they should leave him behind. He didn't want to slow them down. He just asked Yangku to give his share of food to his son. Yangku reassured him help was coming. And then Subai appeared. One of the other warriors, unsure who was approaching, threw a spear, barely missing Subai. Yangku turned on them, furious. But Subai raised his hand and calmly explained that he had insisted on coming. He knelt beside Maimeng, examining the wound. It was bad, far worse than he expected. A deep, gaping injury that would have already killed most ordinary men. Subai activated his healing skill. Light glowed faintly as the magic began to work. The surrounding warriors watched in awe. They couldn't believe Subai could already use magic. Normally, it took 30 days to master a spell. He'd been the sorcerer for barely a few, but his healing skill was still low level, and the process was slow. So he cast it again, and again. He refused to stop. Minutes later, the wound was gone, the skin closed, and Maimeng's breathing steadied. Yangku ordered him to return to the village immediately to rest. Even a totem warrior like him would still be at risk out in the wild. They weren't just facing beasts anymore. Outside the safety of their camp, monsters roamed, much stronger than regular animals. Subai learned that these creatures were divided into 3 tiers: mixed, race beasts, pure, race beasts, and inherited, race beasts. Likewise, their totem warriors were ranked too. At the top were the elite: Yanjiao, Changxi, Qingyan, Maimeng, and Shahong. Below them were the intermediate and junior warriors. Subai realized that monsters with ranged abilities would be especially dangerous. If his healing skill couldn't keep up during real combat, they were in trouble. Just thinking about how Black Fang's weapon shattered against Shahong earlier gave him a reality check. Still, he insisted on seeing the lake. Yangku hesitated. He argued that the beasts there made it too dangerous, even with totem warriors around. But Subai stood firm. He wasn't asking for their sake. He was thinking about the kids back in the village, the old women picking fruit for survival, the children sleeping in the cold. The sorcerer's necklace around his neck pulsed with weight, not just physical but symbolic. He remembered the old sorcerer's promise to protect the tribe at all costs. Finally, Yangku agreed. They moved out. During the journey, Subai noticed Yu Ying collecting fruit from trees as they walked. She smiled and told him that these fruits could help quench their thirst. Subai paused. He hadn't even thought of that. Maybe I'm the one being useless here, he thought. Eventually, they reached the lake. The group rested for a while, waiting for the sunlight to brighten the area. When it did, Subai and Yangku scouted the surroundings. On the far side of the lake were the deadwood wolves, beasts that could shoot sharp projectiles from a distance. Just seeing them made Subai nervous. These were the kinds of monsters that could kill a man from afar. Yangku explained that the real problem wasn't the wolves, it was the rock crocodiles living in the lake. These weren't regular beasts, they were pure-blooded monsters. Even with all their strongest warriors combined, the tribe could only take down maybe 2 of them. That's how powerful they were. So the tribe had developed a system. Wait until the crocodiles went on land to nap, then quickly fetch water and retreat before the monsters woke up. It was dangerous, inefficient, and completely unsustainable. Subai stared at the still lake and muttered, "If this were Earth, humanity would have gone extinct already. He turned to Yangku and laid out his plan. They weren't going to fight the crocodiles, they were going to outsmart them. He explained that lakes usually got their water from either rainfall, surface runoff, or underground sources. Judging by the area, this lake was probably fed by runoff or underground streams. That meant they could try digging a canal. If they dug into the lowlands around the lake, they could create a channel and divert water straight to the tribe. No more risking lives, no more waiting for crocodiles to nap. Yangku looked at him, stunned by the simplicity of the idea. Before they could act, Black Fang was already digging, though in the wrong spot. Subai quickly stopped him, then gathered the others and began organizing tasks. Yu Ying helped guide Black Fang in the correct direction for the ditch. Meanwhile, Manhua started clearing the area of weeds and brush. Subai couldn't help but notice her curves while she bent over. He shook his head to clear the thoughts. Focus. Yu Ying soon reported that the hole was getting damp. That meant they were close to reaching underground water. But just as things were going smoothly, a loud commotion erupted across the lake. Beasts had begun to clash. Subai quickly ordered everyone to stop digging. The noise would attract predators, and the hole would just become a new hiding spot for the monsters. They needed a way to move water without staying too close to the lake. That's when Subai had another idea. Piping. He asked if they had bamboo in the area. Something hollow, hard on the outside, but open on the inside. The others didn't know what bamboo was, but Yanhua offered 3 similar plants: the hollow tree, the red knuckle tree, and heartless grass. 2 of those were only found in their old homeland, but hollow trees, those they could find nearby. With that, Subai outlined a new plan. They would cut the trees, remove the core, and use them as makeshift pipes to transport water from the lake to the village. Without wasting any time, Yangku and a few others began chopping down hollow trees near the lake. Using his incredible strength, Yangku toppled one after another. Subai inspected the logs and was relieved to see they were just what he needed. Tough outer shells with wide, empty centers, perfect for channeling water. Even if this wasn't modern plumbing, it was enough to get the job done. Yu Ying returned moments later to report that Black Fang had finished digging the well. Subai approached and saw water slowly seeping in from below. Success. It proved his theory. There was an underground source connected to the lake. Yanhua got excited and suggested they dig another hole back in the village, but Subai quickly stopped her. That would probably fail. The land around the village was dry, with hardly any trees or greenery. That usually meant very little groundwater. Here, close to the lake, water naturally seeped into the earth because of its proximity to the source. Digging near the village wouldn't give the same result. He turned their attention back to the hollow logs. The next step was simple, but smart. If they buried one end of the log inside the water-filled hole and connected several of them together, the water could be transported across a long distance. As long as they connected enough logs from end to end, they could run a water line all the way to the village. The others finally understood the whole picture. They cheered and nodded in support, ready to help. But Yu Ying had a question. If water could seep into the hole, wouldn't it also seep out of it? Why wasn't it draining deeper into the ground? Subai smiled at her curiosity. He explained it had to do with water pressure. The lake had high pressure, and the hole they dug had low pressure. Water naturally moved from high to low. That's why it flowed into the hole. And while some water would sink deeper, the process was slow, especially since the soil near the lake had good retention properties. He didn't go deeper into the science. No point confusing everyone with technical terms. They just needed to understand the basics for now. Once everything made sense, he began assigning tasks. Yanhua, Yu Ying, and Black Fang were to gather more branches and weeds to cover up the hole. It needed to stay hidden from wild beasts who might turn it into a new watering spot. They also had to stay and monitor the area. If any dangerous animals approached, they were to leave the hole and retreat immediately unless they were confident they could handle it. Subai asked Yangku to accompany him back to the village. They needed more able-bodied men to help transport and connect the logs. Back in the village, Subai rallied everyone together. It was time to solve the tribe's water crisis once and for all. He gave out roles on the spot. Maimeng, now recovered, would lead the reserve soldiers to guard the village temporarily. Shahong was given a team to patrol the path between the lake and the tribe, protecting their supply line. The rest of the men were split into work groups, chopping hollow trees, carrying them to the site, and connecting them. After a few hours of non-stop work, some villagers returned with a problem. The logs weren't fitting tightly, and water kept leaking out between the joints. Subai grabbed a stick and knelt to draw a diagram in the dirt. He explained that one end of each log needed to be cut into a convex shape, while the opposite end should be concave. That way, the pieces could fit together snugly, just like puzzle parts. With that small adjustment, the leaks were solved. 2 days later, the entire system was done. Water flowed from the lake directly into the village, clean and fresh. The entire tribe erupted into celebration. Cheers filled the air as families gathered to drink and wash for the first time in weeks without fear. They praised Subai endlessly, calling him a genius and the savior of the tribe. Subai stood at the edge, trying to explain that he didn't do the hard work. They did. He just directed it. Still, he was smiling. Originally, he thought it would take at least a week to finish, but with the raw strength and efficiency of the villagers, it was done in 2 days. Now that they had water, it was time to tackle the next problem: sanitation. He turned to Yu Ying and gave her a new task. As the Miko, she needed to go around and tell everyone about a new rule. Everyone had to start drinking hot water only. Yu Ying blinked in surprise. Boil water before drinking it? She was confused but nodded. When she went out to spread the message, the villagers were skeptical. They had been drinking lake water for generations. Some of them even ate bugs on purpose when food was scarce. Why should they change now? Yu Ying was nervous. Their pushback scared her, but she remembered her promise to stand beside the sorcerer and help change the tribe's future. She raised her voice and told them plainly, if they drank dirty water, they could get diarrhea. Some people in the village had died before from strange illnesses. This rule was to protect them. The crowd quieted. Her words made sense. They started to listen. That night, back in the tent, Subai asked if she had remembered to tell them to let the boiled water cool before drinking it. Yu Ying smiled and said yes. Subai sat back, satisfied. This was just the beginning. They couldn't boost their numbers overnight, but they could reduce deaths by improving basic survival. Clean water, better food, and proper hygiene. He also needed to level up his healing skill in case a real emergency hit. Yu Ying, meanwhile, was spreading hay across the floor. Subai asked what she was doing, and she said since she was the Miko, she was supposed to sleep beside him and serve him directly. Subai's heart skipped a beat. She was beautiful, quiet, and now she was sleeping next to him. She promised she wasn't a warrior, but if danger came, she would use herself to buy time for him to escape. He smiled nervously. Honestly, he thought, the most dangerous thing in this tent might be you. He laid down and tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, the sheep he counted morphed into Yanhua's curvy figure. He sat up in a panic. No way he was sleeping like this. Instead, he decided to spend the night practicing his healing skill. Quietly, he pricked his finger with a knife, cast healing on it, and repeated the process over and over again. This is where the story concludes. For now, the author of this manhwa sadly passed away last year, leaving this series unfinished. Though it's been some time, the world they created still resonates with readers today. We wanted to honor that by sharing the journey as it was, without altering its heart. If you enjoyed the story so far, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Yumai Recap, and stay tuned for the next video.